I'll never forget the sound of that slap echoing through the Seattle City Hall courthouse. My hand stung, but not as much as my heart. The engagement ring I'd just thrown at Mark's chest clattered against the marble floor. And somewhere in the background, a woman I'd never met before today was holding DNA test results that proved my fiancé had gotten her pregnant. My wedding dress, which had cost me 3 months of nursing salary, suddenly felt like a costume for the worst performance of my life. But here's the thing. If you'd told me that morning that by sunset I'd be performing CPR on a dying billionaire in Discovery Park, wearing that same muddy wedding dress, and that this moment would lead me straight into a murder conspiracy that would nearly cost me my own life, I would have laughed. I would have told you that my day couldn't possibly get any worse than being left at the altar. I would have been so wrong. If you want to hear how a canceled wedding turned into the most dangerous and transformative experience of my life, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story has more twists than a Seattle highway. Drop a comment if you've ever had a day where everything fell apart only to realize it was actually falling into place. Now let me take you back to the beginning, to 6 months before that catastrophic Saturday, when I actually believed Mark Vance was the love of my life. I met Mark at Seattle Grace Hospital, where I worked as a trauma nurse. He was a pharmaceutical sales rep, charming in that effortless way that should have been my first red flag. He wore expensive suits, drove a BMW, and always knew exactly what to say. When he asked me out after delivering samples to our unit, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. Me, Ava Monroe, the girl who'd worked 2 jobs to put herself through nursing school, the girl who'd grown up in a tiny apartment in Tacoma with a single mom who cleaned houses for a living, was dating a man who took me to restaurants with cloth napkins and wine lists. Our relationship moved fast. Too fast, I can see now. Within 3 months, he proposed at Cary Park with the Space Needle glittering behind us. The ring was beautiful, maybe a little too flashy for my taste, but I convinced myself it was perfect, because Mark had chosen it. I said yes because I thought this was what happiness looked like. I thought I'd finally made it, finally escaped the cycle of struggling paycheck to paycheck, finally found someone who valued me. The cracks started showing about 2 months before the wedding. Mark began working late more often, his phone always face down on the table, his explanations for missed dinners increasingly vague. When I'd bring up wedding details, he'd wave them off, saying he trusted my judgment, but it felt less like trust and more like disinterest. My best friend Rachel warned me. She'd caught him at a bar downtown with a brunette, sitting too close, laughing too intimately. When I confronted him, Mark's performance was Oscar-worthy. He cried, claimed it was a work colleague, swore on his mother's grave that I was the only woman he loved. I wanted so desperately to believe him that I did. I should have listened to my gut. I should have called off the wedding. But I'd already sent the invitations, already altered my dress, already imagined the life we'd build together. So I pushed down the doubt, plastered on a smile, and told myself that cold feet was normal, that suspicion was just my insecurity talking. The morning of the wedding, I woke up in my small apartment with genuine excitement fluttering in my chest. Rachel had stayed over, and we drank mimosas while she helped me into my dress. It was simple, elegant, nothing extravagant because we'd decided to save money for a down payment on a house. Mark had been oddly insistent about the courthouse wedding instead of a church ceremony, claiming it was more practical, more modern. I'd agreed, because I always agreed. That was our dynamic. Mark led, I followed. Mark decided, I accepted. We arrived at City Hall at 11:30 for our noon ceremony. The building was beautiful in that old, imposing way, with high ceilings and marble columns that made you feel small. Rachel and my mom were there, along with Mark's best man David and about 15 other guests. It was supposed to be intimate, meaningful. Mark was supposed to meet me in the waiting room at 11:45 so we could walk in together. 11:45 came and went, then noon, then 12:15. I called him 3 times. Each call went straight to voicemail. David claimed he didn't know where Mark was, that he'd left him at his apartment that morning. My mom tried to soothe me, suggesting traffic, a flat tire, anything but the truth that was becoming increasingly obvious. I stood there in that waiting room, in my beautiful dress, watching pitying glances from courthouse staff, feeling humiliation burn through my veins like acid. At 12:30, the door finally opened. But it wasn't just Mark who walked through. A woman stormed in behind him, her face flushed with rage, her belly unmistakably round beneath her fitted dress. She was stunning, the kind of effortlessly beautiful that made you understand why men lied. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and her eyes blazed with an anger that made everyone in the room freeze. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She marched straight up to Mark, who'd gone pale as death, and her voice cut through the stunned silence like a knife. "Mark Vance, how long did you think you could keep this charade going?" Mark's voice came out strangled, desperate. "Sophia, not here. Please, I'll explain everything later." But Sophia, if that was her name, wasn't interested in waiting. She let out a laugh that was more bitter than amused and thrust a manila folder at his chest. Papers scattered, and I watched as if from outside my body as she continued her devastating monologue. "Explain what exactly? The DNA test results? Or maybe explain about your son, the one growing inside me right now? Did you plan to read about your child becoming a father in the newspaper after you married someone else?" The room spun. Every word was a hammer blow. I heard my mom gasp, heard Rachel whisper my name, but I couldn't move. I could only stare at Mark, waiting for him to deny it, to tell this crazy woman she was mistaken, to fix this nightmare I was trapped in. But Mark didn't deny it. His face crumpled, and he stammered, "Ava, I can explain. It's not what it looks like. I was going to tell you." That's when something inside me snapped, not broke, but transformed. All the doubt I'd swallowed, all the red flags I'd ignored, all the times I'd made myself smaller to make him comfortable, came rushing back at once. I walked toward him, and everyone seemed to hold their breath. When I was close enough to see the fear in his eyes, I raised my hand and slapped him across the face with every ounce of strength in my body. The crack echoed through the marble hall. My palms stung. Mark stumbled backward, shocked, holding his reddening cheek. I pulled off the engagement ring, that beautiful symbol of a beautiful lie, and threw it at his chest. It bounced off and clattered to the floor with a tiny pathetic sound. "We're done," I said. My voice was steady, cold, nothing like the desperate pleading I'd imagined if this moment ever came. "Don't call me, don't text me, don't ever contact me again." I turned and walked out of Seattle City Hall in my wedding dress, my veil trailing behind me like a ghost of the future I'd never have. I heard Rachel calling my name, heard my mom's heels clicking as she tried to catch up, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. If I stopped, I'd break down, and I refused to give Mark the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. I walked for blocks, not caring about the stares from passers-by who gawked at the bride wandering downtown Seattle alone. The morning sunshine had given way to typical Seattle drizzle, and soon my dress was spotted with rain. I found myself at Discovery Park, without really deciding to go there. It was where Mark and I had gone on our third date, where he'd kissed me for the first time under the lighthouse. I suppose some masochistic part of me wanted to reclaim it, to prove I could stand in that space without him. The park was nearly empty because of the rain. I walked the trails until my feet ached in my impractical heels, until the bottom of my dress was caked with mud, until I felt numb enough to maybe survive this. I ended up at a bench overlooking the sound, watching the gray waves match my gray mood. That's when I saw her. An elderly woman, impeccably dressed in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my car, was sitting on a nearby bench. At first, I thought she was just resting, but something about her posture seemed wrong. She was slumped too far forward, her expensive leather purse tipped over beside her, its contents spilling onto the wet ground. My nursing instincts overrode my heartbreak instantly. I ran to her, my heels sinking into the muddy grass, and knelt beside her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" No response. I pressed 2 fingers to her neck, searching for a pulse. It was there, but thready and weak. Her breathing was shallow, labored. Her lips had a bluish tinge. This wasn't exhaustion or fainting. This was serious. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911 while simultaneously lowering her gently to the ground and beginning to assess her. Years of emergency training took over. Check airway, breathing, circulation. Her pulse was dropping. I positioned myself to start CPR if needed, all while giving the 911 operator our location. As I worked, my eyes caught something. An opened water bottle lay on its side near the bench, water still dribbling from it onto the ground. There was something off about the smell, a faint chemical odor that didn't belong. Without thinking, I grabbed a tissue from her spilled purse and carefully picked up the bottle, setting it aside to show the paramedics. Her pulse stuttered, then stopped. I immediately began chest compressions, counting out loud, my wedding dress bunching around my knees in the mud, mascara running down my face, mixing with rain and sweat. "Come on," I muttered between compressions. "Stay with me. Don't you dare die on me today." After what felt like hours but was probably only 2 minutes, her pulse flickered back. Weak, but there. The sound of sirens cut through the park, and soon paramedics were running toward us with a stretcher and equipment. I rattled off her vitals, my observations, pointed out the water bottle with the strange smell. They worked quickly, efficiently, loading her onto the stretcher. "Are you family?" one paramedic asked me. "No, I just found her, but I'm a nurse at Seattle Grace. I'm coming with you." They didn't argue. Maybe it was my dress, maybe it was the authority in my voice, but they let me climb into the ambulance. As we raced toward Harborview Medical Center, I dug through her purse looking for identification. Eleanor Hayes, according to her driver's license. The address was in Madison Park, one of Seattle's wealthiest neighborhoods. Her purse contained credit cards with names I recognized from charity galas, covered in the society pages, a phone with a cracked screen, and a small leather-bound notebook with cryptic notes about medications and appointments. At the hospital, everything became controlled chaos. The ER team took over, and I found myself standing in the hallway, suddenly aware that I was covered in mud, my wedding dress ruined, my entire life in shambles. A nurse I knew from a conference last year did a double take when she saw me. "Ava? What happened to you?" I looked down at myself and let out a laugh that bordered on hysterical. Long story, very long story. Before I could elaborate, a man burst through the ER doors, moving with the kind of focused urgency that suggested he was used to handling crises. He was tall, probably mid-30s, with dark hair and sharp features that would have been handsome if they weren't currently twisted with worry. He wore an expensive suit, slightly rumpled as if he'd dressed in a hurry, and his eyes scanned the ER frantically until they landed on the nurse's station. "Eleanor Hayes, where is she?" "I'm her grandson, Ethan Hayes." The nurse began to give him the standard privacy spiel, but I stepped forward. "She's in Trauma Bay 3. They're stabilizing her now. I'm the one who found her." Ethan Hayes turned to look at me fully for the first time, and I watched his expression cycle through confusion, concern, and then something I couldn't quite place as he took in my mud-stained wedding dress and disheveled appearance. "You found my grandmother?" "In Discovery Park. She'd collapsed. Her pulse was almost gone when I got to her. I'm a trauma nurse, so I started CPR until the ambulance arrived." Something in his face softened. "Thank you. God, thank you. If you hadn't been there..." He couldn't finish the sentence, just ran a hand through his hair, clearly trying to hold himself together. Before we could say more, 2 more people rushed into the ER. A younger man, mid-20s, with the same dark hair as Ethan but a softer face, and a woman about my age with striking features and an expensive designer dress that screamed money. The younger man made a show of looking distraught, though something about it felt performative to me. "Ethan, how is she? Oh God, is grandmother going to be okay?" His voice cracked dramatically. "We don't know yet, Julian. They're working on her now." The woman, who'd been hanging back, stepped forward with a calculating look in her eyes. She studied me with barely concealed suspicion, her gaze traveling from my ruined dress to my face. "And who is this?" I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name," Ethan said, turning back to me. "Ava Monroe. I was in the park when I found Mrs. Hayes." "Isabella Rossi," the woman introduced herself, though she didn't offer her hand. Instead, she leaned close to Julian, speaking just loudly enough for me to hear. How fortunate someone was there, though you have to wonder, these days, if anyone does anything without an agenda. The implications stung, but I was too exhausted to react. Julian shot her a warning look but didn't contradict her. Ethan, however, stepped between us, his jaw tight. "My grandmother would be dead if it weren't for Miss Monroe. Show some respect, Isabella." The tension was interrupted by a doctor emerging from the trauma bay. Dr. Chen, one of the attending physicians I'd worked with before, recognized me and nodded before addressing the group. "Mrs. Hayes is stable for now. Her vitals have improved, but we found something concerning in her preliminary blood work. There's evidence of a high-dose sedative in her system, something that's not on any of her prescribed medications. We're running more comprehensive tests, but protocol requires that we notify the police about a potential poisoning case." The words hung in the air like a bomb. Ethan went rigid. Julian's performative grief morphed into something harder to read, shock mixed with what might have been fear. Isabella's face remained carefully neutral. "Poisoning?" Ethan repeated. "That's impossible. Who would want to hurt my grandmother?" Dr. Chen's expression was professionally sympathetic but firm. "I can't speculate. Detective Miller from Seattle PD is already on his way. He'll want to speak with everyone, especially you, Miss Monroe, since you were the first on scene." My already surreal day had just taken another sharp turn into the bizarre. I nodded numbly. Of course. Whatever I can do to help. The next few hours were a blur of police questions, medical updates, and watching the Hayes family dynamics unfold like a tense stage play. Detective Miller was thorough, asking me to recount every detail about finding Eleanor, the strange smell from the water bottle, anything I might have noticed about the scene. I described everything as precisely as I could, my nursing training helping me recall specific observations. Julian and Isabella sat together in the waiting area, whispering urgently to each other when they thought no one was watching. Ethan paced like a caged animal, fielding calls from what sounded like family attorneys and board members. Eleanor Hayes, I was learning, wasn't just wealthy. She was the matriarch of Hayes Industries, a tech company worth billions. The implications of her potential poisoning extended far beyond family drama. Around 8 p.m., after Eleanor had been moved to ICU and was resting under heavy monitoring, Ethan approached me. I was sitting in a corner of the waiting room, still in my ridiculous dress, trying to figure out how to call a cab home. Miss Monroe, Ava, I know today has been insane for you, and I don't even know why you were in that park in a wedding dress, but my grandmother is asking for you. She woke up briefly, and when I told her what happened, she insisted on thanking her angel personally. I followed him to the ICU, where Eleanor Hayes lay in bed looking fragile but alert. Her eyes, sharp despite her ordeal, fixed on me as I entered. You, she said, her voice raspy but determined. You're the bride who saved me. I couldn't help but smile sadly. Former bride. That wedding didn't quite work out. Good, Eleanor said with surprising firmness. Any man who'd leave a woman like you at the altar is a fool. Now come here, dear. I want to look at you properly. I moved closer, and she reached out a thin hand to clasp mine. Ethan tells me you performed CPR, that you recognized something was wrong with that water. You might have saved my life. The Hayes family owes you a debt we can never repay. You don't owe me anything, Mrs. Hayes. I'm a nurse. It's what I do. Eleanor, please. And I think we both know this was more than nursing. This was fate, destiny, whatever you want to call it. You were meant to be in that park today. I didn't believe in fate, especially not after the disaster my day had been, but I wasn't about to argue with a woman who'd nearly died. We talked for a few more minutes before the nurse shooed me out, insisting Eleanor needed rest. As I left, Ethan walked me to the elevator. I know this is strange, but would you be willing to visit my grandmother again? She's going to be here for a few days while they run tests and figure out what happened. I think your presence calms her, and frankly, I trust you. There's something very wrong happening in my family, and I don't know who to trust anymore. His vulnerability caught me off guard. Here was this powerful man, probably used to controlling every situation, admitting he was scared and lost. I knew I should walk away, that getting involved with the Hayes family drama was asking for trouble, but something in his eyes, a genuine desperation, made me nod. I'll come by tomorrow. I'm off shift for the next 3 days anyway. I didn't mention that I'd requested the time off for my honeymoon. Thank you, Ava. Truly. And for what it's worth, whoever left you today made the biggest mistake of his life. That night, I finally made it home to my apartment, stripped off the wedding dress that had cost me 3 months' salary, and stuffed it into the trash. I stood in the shower until the water ran cold, washing away mud and makeup and the remnants of the future I'd imagined. When I finally climbed into bed, my phone buzzed with texts from Mark, increasingly desperate pleas for me to talk to him, to let him explain. I blocked his number and fell into a fitless sleep. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. When I finally answered, a woman's voice, nervous and urgent, came through the line. Is this Ava Monroe, the woman who was supposed to marry Mark Vance yesterday? My stomach dropped. Who is this? My name is Sophia Rossi. I'm the woman who interrupted your wedding. Please don't hang up. I know you have every reason to hate me, but I need to talk to you. It's important. It's about Isabella. Isabella? You know Isabella Rossi? There was a pause, heavy with meaning. She's my sister, and I think she and her boyfriend are trying to kill that old woman you saved yesterday. I heard them talking last night, and Ava, I'm scared. They said it almost worked, and that they need to try again soon. I don't know what to do, but I know you were there, and I thought maybe you could help. The pieces were clicking together in a way that made my blood run cold. Isabella Rossi, who'd been so suspicious of me at the hospital. Julian Hayes, with his practiced grief and whispered conversations. Sophia Rossi, Mark's pregnant mistress, was Isabella's sister. Where are you right now? I asked, my mind racing. I'm at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill. Victrola on 15th. Please. I know you don't owe me anything, but that old woman's life is in danger, and I think if I go to the police alone, Isabella will make sure I disappear. She's done it before, gotten rid of people who knew too much about her schemes. I should have called Ethan, or Detective Miller, or anyone, but instead agreed to meet Sophia. Maybe it was residual anger at Mark, maybe it was genuine concern for Eleanor, or maybe I'd just had such a spectacularly terrible day that caution felt irrelevant. I threw on jeans and a sweater, pulled my hair into a ponytail, and headed out. Sophia was easy to spot in the coffee shop. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, one hand resting protectively on her pregnant belly. When she saw me, relief flooded her face, followed immediately by guilt. "I'm so sorry," were her first words as I sat down across from her. "I'm so sorry about yesterday, about Mark, about everything. You didn't deserve any of that." "You're right, I didn't. But right now, that's not what matters. Tell me everything about Isabella and Julian." Sophia took a shaky breath and began. "Isabella is 3 years older than me. We grew up poor, like really poor, in Tacoma. She always said she'd marry rich, that she'd do whatever it took to never be broke again. When she met Julian Hayes at some tech conference last year, it was like all her dreams came true. He's the younger grandson, the one who everyone says will never measure up to Ethan. Isabella saw an opportunity. An opportunity for what? Money. Power. Julian is desperate to prove himself, desperate to get out from under his brother's shadow. Eleanor Hayes controls everything through a trust, and from what I've overheard, Julian only gets a modest allowance compared to what Ethan gets as the CEO of Hayes Industries. Isabella convinced Julian that he deserves more, that his grandmother is old and out of touch, that if something happened to her before she changed her will again, he'd inherit enough to start his own company and finally be somebody. My hands clenched around my coffee cup, so they decided to kill her. I didn't want to believe it at first. Isabella has always been ruthless, but murder? Then I started noticing things. Weeks ago, she asked me weird questions about my nursing school classes, about drugs and their side effects. I didn't think much of it until yesterday when I overheard her and Julian fighting. She was furious that their plan had failed, that some stupid bride in a park had ruined everything. That's when I realized she was talking about you, about Eleanor Hayes. I put it all together. Why come to me? Why not go straight to the police? Sophia's eyes filled with tears. Because Isabella has connections, okay? She dated a cop before Julian, and she keeps dirt on people. Insurance, she calls it. If I go to the police alone with just overheard conversations, she'll twist it, make me look crazy or vindictive. But you're credible. You saved Eleanor's life. You're a nurse. People will believe you. She wasn't wrong, but the weight of what she was asking settled heavily on my shoulders. Does Mark know about any of this? God, no. Mark is an idiot and a cheater, but he's not a criminal. Isabella kept her distance from him, said she couldn't risk him saying something stupid that would expose her plans. I sat back, processing everything. Yesterday I was supposed to get married. Today I was apparently caught in the middle of a murder plot involving a billionaire family. Life had a twisted sense of humor. I need to talk to Ethan Hayes and Detective Miller. Will you come with me and tell them everything you just told me? Sophia nodded, relief evident on her face. Yes, anything. I just want to keep my baby safe and make sure I'm not an accessory to murder by staying silent. We met Ethan at Hayes Industries headquarters, a gleaming tower in downtown Seattle. His office was on the top floor, all glass and chrome with views of the Sound that probably cost more than my annual salary. Detective Miller joined us within an hour, and Sophia repeated her story, this time with more details about specific conversations she'd overheard, dates, times, even text messages she'd secretly screenshotted from Isabella's phone. Ethan looked like he'd aged 10 years by the time she finished. Julian, my own brother, how could he? He couldn't complete the thought. Detective Miller was more pragmatic. This is helpful, Miss Rossi, but it's mostly circumstantial. We need concrete proof, something that would hold up in court. A confession would be ideal, but people like Isabella Rossi are too smart to confess without pressure. What if we gave them pressure? I found myself saying. All eyes turned to me. What if we made them think their plan could still work, that I was the only obstacle? If I pretended to be on their side, wore a wire, got them talking? Absolutely not, Ethan said immediately. That's dangerous. These people have already tried to kill my grandmother. They won't hesitate to hurt you. But Detective Miller was nodding slowly. It could work. If Miss Monroe were willing, we could set up a controlled situation, full surveillance, backup ready to move in at the first sign of trouble. I thought about Eleanor lying in that hospital bed, about how she'd called me her angel, about how easily Julian and Isabella would try again if we didn't stop them. I thought about my own pathetic wedding day, about how I'd felt so powerless standing in that courthouse. Maybe it was time to take some power back. I'll do it. The plan came together over the next 2 days. I would approach Julian, pretend that I'd figured out something was suspicious about Eleanor's collapse, but frame it as an opportunity rather than an accusation. I'd hint that I was bitter about my ruined wedding, that I was in debt from nursing school loans, that maybe I'd be willing to help them for the right price. The wire I'd wear was tiny, practically invisible, tucked into a necklace Detective Miller provided. On Wednesday afternoon, I showed up at the hospital during visiting hours when I knew Julian would be there. I'd texted him asking to talk privately, saying I had concerns about Eleanor's care that I wanted to discuss. He agreed immediately, probably thinking he could manipulate the naive nurse. We met in the hospital cafeteria, at a corner table far from other visitors. Julian had his charm turned up full blast, all concern and gratitude. "Ava, thank you so much for agreeing to meet. My grandmother speaks so highly of you. She keeps saying you're her guardian angel." I forced a tight smile. "About that. I need to be honest with you about something, and I hope you'll understand why I'm coming to you instead of Ethan." Julian leaned forward, interest sharpening his features. "Of course. What is it?" "The day I found your grandmother, there was something off about the scene. The water bottle, the way she'd collapsed, the chemical smell. I'm a trauma nurse. I've seen overdoses. I know what sedative poisoning looks like." I paused, watching his face carefully. He'd gone very still. "The thing is, I also know what it's like to have family who controls everything, who makes you feel like you'll never be good enough." "What are you saying, Ava?" "I'm saying that I understand being passed over, being underestimated. I'm saying that my fiancé left me at the altar 2 days ago, and I'm sitting here in massive debt from student loans with nothing to show for all the sacrifices I've made. I'm saying that Eleanor Hayes is a very old woman who's had a long, full life, and maybe the universe brought me to that park at exactly the right time not to save her, but to be in the right place to potentially help someone else who deserves a chance." The silence stretched between us. I could see Julian calculating, trying to determine if I was genuine or if this was a trap. Finally, he spoke, his voice careful. "That's a very interesting perspective. But I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm implying that if someone, hypothetically, wanted to ensure that Eleanor's next medical incident was successful, having a nurse who found her the first time speaking up about her concerns regarding her care might be valuable. I'm implying that I could be persuaded to look the other way, maybe even help, if the compensation was right." Julian's eyes gleamed. "I think I'd need to discuss this with someone before we go any further. Are you free for coffee tomorrow? Say 10 a.m. at the Starbucks on Pine Street?" "I'll be there." That night, I met with Detective Miller and Ethan to debrief. Ethan was clearly struggling with the betrayal, pacing his office with barely contained fury. "My brother. My own goddamn brother is trying to kill our grandmother for inheritance money. How did I miss this? How did I not see what he was becoming?" "People hide what they want you not to see," I said quietly, thinking of Mark and all the signs I'd ignored. "Julian showed you what you wanted to believe, just like Isabella showed me polite suspicion instead of murderous intent." The next morning, I showed up at the Starbucks with the wire active and backup officers stationed around the coffee shop in civilian clothes. Julian was already there, and he wasn't alone. Isabella sat beside him, her expression calculating and cold. So much for subtlety. I sat down across from them, keeping my expression neutral. "I thought we were meeting alone, Julian." "Isabella is my partner in all things," he said smoothly. "If we're going to have this conversation, she needs to be part of it. I hope you understand." "As long as we all understand each other, that's fine." Isabella spoke first, her voice sharp. "Let's cut through the bullshit, shall we? You're a nurse drowning in debt with a recently destroyed personal life. We're people who need a problem solved. The question is, are you really willing to do what you're suggesting, or is this some kind of trap?" I met her eyes steadily. The only trap would be thinking I have anything left to lose. My wedding fell apart. I'm 32 years old, starting over from scratch, and I'm tired of being the good girl who follows all the rules while people like you get everything handed to them. So yes, Isabella, I'm willing. The question is, what exactly are you offering? Julian glanced around nervously before leaning in. $200,000, transferred to an offshore account that can't be traced back to us. In exchange, the next time Eleanor has a medical incident, you ensure it's fatal. You're her nurse now. She trusts you completely. It would be easy for you to administer something that would look like natural causes, especially given her age and recent health scare. My stomach churned, but I kept my face blank. That's a lot of money for someone to just suddenly die. Won't that raise suspicions? Isabella smiled coldly. The beauty of this is that the first attempt already happened. Everyone knows someone tried to poison Eleanor. When she dies from what appears to be complications from that initial poisoning, combined with her advanced age, it will be tragic but not suspicious. And you, her devoted nurse who tried so hard to save her, will be above reproach. What about the inheritance? Won't Ethan get suspicious when Julian suddenly gets a windfall? The current will divides everything between Ethan and Julian, 60-40. It's enough that I can finally start my own venture, get out from under my brother's shadow. Eleanor has been threatening to change it, to leave more to charity, to punish me for not living up to her standards. We can't let that happen. I pretended to consider, then nodded slowly. Okay, but I want half up front, 100,000 deposited by the end of the week, and the rest once it's done. And I want it in writing that this was your idea, your plan, just in case something goes wrong and someone tries to make me the fall guy. Julian and Isabella exchanged glances. We're not putting anything in writing, Isabella said flatly. Then I'm not doing it, I countered. I'm not stupid enough to commit murder with no insurance. You want me to trust you with my freedom, my entire life? Give me something that ensures you go down if I do. The tension was thick enough to cut. Finally, Isabella pulled out her phone. Fine, I'll record a video message. Say it's a contingency plan that you insisted on. Julian and I will both clearly state our involvement. But if that video ever surfaces, you're just as guilty as we are. Deal. What they didn't know was that Detective Miller's team was recording everything, that the wire I wore had picked up every damning word. Isabella pulled up her phone's camera and hit record. What followed was the most incriminating confession I could have hoped for. For the record, Isabella began, her voice dripping with false sincerity. This video is being made at the insistence of Ava Monroe, who has agreed to help us with our plan regarding Eleanor Hayes. Just so we're all clear, Julian and I initiated this arrangement. We approached Ava with the proposition that she help us ensure Eleanor's death appears natural, following our previous attempt that unfortunately failed. Julian leaned into the frame, adding his own confession. The first attempt was our idea entirely. We used sedatives mixed into her water bottle at the park. We thought it would look like a heart attack or stroke, something natural for a woman her age. But this interfering bride in a wedding dress had to play hero. He laughed bitterly. Now we're trying again, this time with professional help. Ava will administer medication that will cause respiratory failure, easily attributed to complications from the initial poisoning. My grandmother's age and weakened state will make it completely believable. Isabella continued, clearly proud of their scheme. Once Eleanor is gone, Julian inherits his share before the new will can be executed. We're talking about $400 million. Enough for Julian to finally prove he's not just Ethan's incompetent little brother. Enough for us to disappear to Europe if we need to, live like royalty. Ava gets her 200,000, and everyone wins. Well, except Eleanor, but she's had 87 good years. That's more than most people get. And if anything goes wrong, Julian added, looking directly at the camera, if the police come sniffing around, Ava goes down with us. She's the one with access. She's the one who'll actually do it. We're just the grieving family members. He smiled, and it was chilling how easily the mask of concern slipped back on. But nothing will go wrong. This plan is perfect. Isabella stopped the recording and sent it to an email address I provided, one that Detective Miller had set up specifically for this operation. There, your insurance policy. Now, we'll have the first payment ready by Friday. Eleanor should have her fatal accident by Monday at the latest. Understood? Understood, I said, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. We stood to leave, and I made it exactly 3 steps out of the Starbucks before Detective Miller and 6 uniformed officers surrounded us. Isabella's face went white, then red with rage. Julian just looked confused, as if he couldn't comprehend how his perfect plan had fallen apart. Julian Hayes, Isabella Rossi, you're both under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder of Eleanor Hayes, Detective Miller announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent coffee shop. You have the right to remain silent. Isabella screamed, a sound of pure fury. You bitch! You set us up! No, I said calmly as officers cuffed her hands behind her back. "You set yourselves up. I just gave you enough rope to hang with." Julian was quieter, his face crumbling as the reality sank in. Ethan will never forgive me. I just wanted to be worth something. I just wanted to matter. "You mattered," I told him, surprising myself with the note of pity in my voice. "You just chose to matter in the worst possible way." The arrest made every news channel in Seattle. "Hayes Industries heir arrested in grandmother's attempted murder," screamed the headlines. The society pages that had once covered Hayes family galas with breathless admiration now dissected the scandal with vicious glee. The video confession, combined with evidence of the sedatives purchased under fake names, the financial records showing Julian's mounting debts, and testimony from Sophia about conversations she'd overheard, built an airtight case. The trial 3 months later was a spectacle. Isabella's lawyer tried to claim entrapment, that I'd seduced them into confessing to a crime they never actually intended to commit. But the prosecution had the receipts, literally. Proof of the first poisoning attempt, traces of the sedative in Eleanor's system, Julian's fingerprints on the water bottle I'd preserved from the park. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Julian Hayes was sentenced to 25 years for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Isabella Rossi got 30 years, with the judge noting her clear leadership role and lack of remorse. As they were led away, Isabella turned and locked eyes with me one last time. The hatred there was palpable, but so was something else. Defeat. She'd played the game ruthlessly and lost to someone she'd dismissed as a naive nurse in a wedding dress. But the story wasn't over yet. While the criminal case was unfolding, another drama played out in civil court. Sophia, with legal help that Ethan quietly provided, sued Mark Vance for full child support and damages related to emotional distress and fraud. Mark tried to fight it, but his own text messages, his pattern of lies, and witness testimony from coworkers about his double life destroyed any sympathy the judge might have had. The court ordered Mark to pay substantial child support, continue Sophia's health insurance through his employer, and contribute to all medical expenses related to the pregnancy and birth. They also awarded Sophia a settlement for fraud and emotional distress. Mark's fancy lifestyle couldn't survive the financial hit. He lost his BMW, his downtown apartment, and eventually his job when the pharmaceutical company decided his scandalous personal life reflected poorly on their family values brand. I heard through mutual friends that he'd moved back in with his parents in Spokane, working as a sales associate at a big box store. The man who'd once taken me to restaurants with sommeliers was now asking customers if they wanted to apply for a store credit card. I wish I could say I felt vindictive satisfaction, but mostly I just felt sad for who I'd been when I loved him, for how little I'd valued myself that his attention felt like winning. Eleanor recovered fully, though the experience changed her. She became less trusting, more careful, but also more determined to live life on her own terms. She revised her will with a vengeance, cutting Julian out entirely and leaving his portion to various charities, but she also did something unexpected. She established a foundation called the Ava Monroe Second Chances Fund, dedicated to helping nurses pay off their student loans and supporting survivors of domestic abuse and toxic relationships. "You gave me a second chance at life," Eleanor told me when she announced the foundation at a press conference. "Now we're going to give other women second chances to build the lives they deserve." The foundation's first recipient was Sophia Rossi, who used the support to finish her nursing degree while pregnant. She gave birth to a healthy baby boy she named Adrian. I visited her in the hospital, bringing flowers and a stuffed elephant. When I held Adrian, his tiny fingers wrapping around mine, I felt something shift inside me. This child, born from such a mess of betrayal and pain, was completely innocent. His existence wasn't a tragedy, it was just a new beginning. "I'm naming you as his godmother," Sophia said, watching me with Adrian. "If that's okay. I know we met under the worst circumstances, but you've been kinder to me than I deserved. You could have hated me for destroying your wedding, but instead you've treated me like a person worth saving." I looked down at Adrian's perfect little face and felt tears prick my eyes. I'd be honored. As for Ethan and me, our relationship evolved slowly, carefully. We'd been through something intense together, seen each other at our worst and most vulnerable. He'd watched me pretend to be willing to commit murder. I'd watched him grapple with his brother's betrayal. That kind of experience either destroys people or bonds them in ways normal courtship never could. We started with coffee, just talking about anything other than attempted murder and criminal trials. He told me about the pressure of running Hayes Industries, about always trying to be the responsible one, the good grandson. I told him about growing up poor, About my mom working 3 jobs to keep us afloat, about how I'd always equated success with financial security, and how that desperation had made me vulnerable to someone like Mark. "You're not desperate anymore," Ethan observed one evening as we walked through Discovery Park, deliberately retracing the path where I'd found Eleanor. "You're different now. Stronger." I'm healing," I corrected. "There's a difference. Strong implies I've got it all figured out. Healing means I'm still working on it." 6 months after the trial ended, Eleanor hosted a garden party at the Hayes estate. It was supposedly to celebrate her 88th birthday, but really it was her way of showing Seattle society that the Hayes family had survived the scandal with dignity intact. I arrived in a simple blue dress, worlds away from the mud-stained wedding gown that had started this whole journey. Eleanor held court like the queen she was, surrounded by friends and family who'd stuck by her. Ethan stayed close to my side, his hand occasionally brushing against mine, a promise of something we were both still figuring out. Sophia was there too, with Adrian in a stroller, her sister's crimes no reflection on her own character in Eleanor's eyes. At one point, Eleanor pulled me aside to a quiet corner of the garden. "I want you to have something," she said, pressing a small velvet box into my hand. "Open it." Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a pendant shaped like an angel's wing. Simple, elegant, nothing like the flashy ring Mark had given me. "Eleanor, I can't accept this." "You can and you will. You were my angel that day, Ava. But more than that, you were your own angel. You saved yourself just as much as you saved me. Never forget that." I hugged her, this formidable woman who'd survived 88 years, a poisoning attempt, and her own grandson's betrayal. "Thank you. For everything. For seeing me as more than just the nurse who happened to be there. My dear, you were never just anything. You were always extraordinary. You just needed to believe it yourself." As the party continued, I found myself standing at the edge of the garden, looking out over the Sound. The water was calm today, reflecting the late afternoon sun like scattered diamonds. A year ago, I'd been planning a wedding to a man who didn't value me. 6 months ago, I'd been wearing that wedding dress in the mud, thinking my life was over. Now I was standing in a billionaire's garden, wearing an angel wing necklace, with the possibility of real love waiting patiently for me to be ready. I had a career I was proud of, friends I trusted, and most importantly, I had myself back. Ethan appeared beside me, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. He offered me one, and we stood there in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "What are you thinking about?" he asked eventually. About how the worst day of my life turned into the catalyst for the best year of my life. About how sometimes things have to completely fall apart before they can come together in a better way. "Do you regret any of it? The wedding that never happened? Getting dragged into my family's nightmare?" I considered the question seriously. Did I regret Mark? The humiliation? The danger? The pain? "No," I said finally. "I regret who I was when I was with Mark, how small I made myself to fit into his life. But I don't regret how it ended. That disaster gave me permission to become someone I actually like." Ethan smiled, that genuine smile that transformed his serious face. "I like who you've become too. Actually, I more than like it." "Ethan Hayes, are you flirting with me?" "I'm attempting to. Is it working?" I laughed, a real laugh that came from somewhere deep and healed inside me. "It might be. Ask me again in another 6 months when I've had more therapy and maybe learned to trust again." "I can wait. You're worth waiting for, Ava Monroe." We clinked our glasses together, a toast to second chances and new beginnings and the strange, twisted path that had brought us both to this moment. In the distance, I could hear Eleanor's laugh, sharp and delighted, very much alive despite her grandson's best efforts. Sophia was cooing at Adrian, building a life from the rubble of betrayal. And I was here, standing in the sunset, finally understanding what it meant to choose myself first. The media had called our story the wedding day murder plot. Lifetime had already reached out about making it into a movie. But that wasn't really what it was about. It wasn't about murder or inheritance or even justice, though all of those played their parts. It was about recognizing your worth when everyone around you is trying to convince you you're worthless. It was about having the courage to walk away from the life you planned when you realize it's killing who you really are. It was about the difference between being saved and saving yourself, and how sometimes those two things look identical from the outside but feel completely different from within. 3 months later, I moved into a new apartment in Capitol Hill, nothing fancy but mine in a way that my old place never was. Eleanor had given me a substantial reward for saving her life, Money I initially refused until she pointed out that refusing help was just another form of self-sabotage. I used it to pay off my student loans, every single penny of crushing debt that had made me feel trapped for so long. The day I made that final payment, I threw a party. Rachel was there, and Sophia with Adrian, and Ethan, and even my mom who'd driven up from Tacoma with tears of pride in her eyes. We ate cheap pizza and drank expensive champagne that Eleanor had sent over, and we toasted to freedom. To Ava, Rachel said, raising her glass, who taught us all that sometimes the universe cancels your wedding because it has something way better planned? To Ava, everyone echoed, and I felt something I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. I felt proud, not of what I'd survived, but of who I'd chosen to become in spite of it. That night, after everyone had left and I was alone in my new apartment, surrounded by boxes I hadn't unpacked yet, I pulled out my phone. Mark had tried to contact me a few times over the months, apologizing, begging for another chance, insisting that we were meant to be together. I'd ignored every message. But tonight, I finally responded. Mark, I need you to understand something. I don't hate you. I don't even think about you most days anymore. What you did to me, leaving me at that altar, was the greatest gift you could have given me, even though you didn't mean it that way. You freed me from a future where I would have spent my whole life trying to be enough for someone who would never value me. So thank you, genuinely, for being exactly who you were. It taught me to be exactly who I am. Don't contact me again. I'm done with this chapter. I hit send and then blocked his number permanently. No anger, no bitterness, just closure on my own terms. 2 years after that disastrous wedding day, Eleanor Hayes passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 90. The funeral was a testament to the life she'd lived. Hundreds of people gathering to pay their respects to a woman who'd built an empire, survived her own grandson's murder attempt, and never lost her fierce spirit. I sat with Ethan during the service, his hand gripping mine tightly as he delivered the eulogy. He talked about her strength, her stubbornness, her capacity for forgiveness toward those who'd genuinely earned it, and her complete lack of tolerance for those who hadn't. He talked about how she'd taught him that family wasn't just about blood, but about who showed up when it mattered. And then he said something that made everyone in that church turn to look at me. My grandmother once told me that angels come in unexpected forms, that sometimes salvation arrives wearing a muddy wedding dress in the rain. She believed that the universe puts people in our path exactly when we need them, and that the greatest gift we can give is to recognize those moments and not let them pass us by. Today, as we say goodbye to her, I want to honor that belief by promising never to let meaningful moments pass me by again. After the service, as people mingled in the cemetery sharing stories and memories, Ethan pulled me aside to Eleanor's grave. Fresh flowers covered the dark earth, hundreds of bouquets from people whose lives she'd touched. She left you something, Ethan said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. She made me promise to give it to you after she was gone. Inside was a handwritten letter in Eleanor's distinctive script, shaky but determined. My dearest Ava, if you're reading this, I've finally gone to see what comes next. Don't be sad. I've had a spectacular life, and you gave me 2 extra years I wouldn't have had. Years where I got to know you, to watch you blossom into the magnificent woman you were always meant to be. Years where I got to see my grandson fall helplessly in love with someone who actually deserves him. I'm leaving you something in my will, details that my lawyers will share, but more importantly, I'm leaving you with this. You came into my life as my savior, but you stayed as my friend. You reminded me that strength isn't about never falling down, it's about getting back up with grace. Thank you for showing me, and showing Ethan, what real courage looks like. Live boldly, love fearlessly, and never again settle for less than you deserve. With all my love and gratitude, Eleanor. I read the letter twice, tears streaming down my face, while Ethan waited patiently beside me. When I finally looked up, he was watching me with an expression so tender it made my heart ache. She really loved you, you know, he said softly. In the end, she talked about you more than anyone. About how you'd changed everything, not just by saving her life, but by reminding her what mattered. I loved her too. She was like the grandmother I never had, the mentor I didn't know I needed. We stood there in the cemetery as the sun set, mourning a woman who'd lived fully and loved fiercely. And in that moment, I realized something profound. The story that started with a canceled wedding and a woman dying in a park had never really been about any of that. It had been about learning that sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to discover what you actually need. Mark had wanted a wife who'd fit into his life without complicating it. Julian and Isabella had wanted money they hadn't earned and didn't deserve. Even I, at the beginning, had wanted validation from someone else, proof that I was valuable because someone else said so. But what I'd learned, what Eleanor had taught me, was that the only validation that mattered came from within. That being saved meant nothing if you didn't then save yourself. That love, real love, wasn't about fitting into someone else's idea of who you should be. It was about being seen completely and chosen anyway. 6 months after Eleanor's funeral, on a clear Saturday afternoon, Ethan and I stood in Discovery Park at the spot where I'd found his grandmother. We'd planted a memorial bench there with a plaque that read, "Eleanor Hayes, who believed in angels and second chances." It overlooked the sound, peaceful and permanent. "This is where it all started," I said, running my hand over the smooth wood of the bench. "No," Ethan corrected gently. "This is where it all changed. It started when you had the courage to walk out of that courthouse alone. This is just where the universe rewarded that courage." He was right. The real beginning hadn't been the dramatic moment in the park, or even the showdown at the courthouse. It had been every small choice I made afterward to choose myself, to trust my instincts, to demand better. "I have something I want to ask you," Ethan said, and my heart started racing because I knew what was coming, and this time it felt right in a way nothing with Mark ever had. He didn't kneel. We talked about that, about how we both hated the symbolism of someone being elevated, while the other person literally lowered themselves. Instead, he stood in front of me, equal and honest, and pulled out a simple ring, nothing like the flashy diamond Mark had chosen. "Ava Monroe, you saved my grandmother's life, helped put my criminal brother in prison, and somehow through all of that chaos, you made me believe in the possibility of real partnership. Not someone to complete me or fix me, but someone to build something with. I'm not asking you to marry me today or even this year. I'm asking if you'll consider, when you're ready, building a future together, one where we both get to be exactly who we are." I looked at this man who'd waited patiently while I healed, who'd never pressured me to be anything other than myself, who'd seen me at my worst and my best and valued both equally. I thought about the girl who'd agreed to marry Mark, who'd been so desperate for security that she'd ignored every red flag. That girl was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone whole. "Yes," I said. "Not today, not yet, but yes. When we're both ready, when it's right, absolutely yes." We sat on Eleanor's memorial bench, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, planning a future we'd build together on our own terms. No more settling, no more making myself small, no more accepting less than I deserved. And somewhere, I like to think Eleanor was watching, maybe laughing at how her near-death experience had orchestrated something beautiful from something broken. So here's what I want you to understand. What I wish I could tell every person who's ever felt trapped in a relationship that diminishes them, every person who's stayed too long with someone who doesn't value them, every person who thinks walking away means failure. Your worst day might be the first day of your best life, but only if you're brave enough to recognize it. Sometimes love means letting go of what's killing you to make room for what will help you thrive. And sometimes the universe cancels your wedding because it knows you deserve a better story. The question is, when your moment comes, when everything falls apart and you're standing in the wreckage of what you thought your life would be, will you have the courage to walk away? Will you choose yourself even when it's terrifying? Will you demand better even when settling feels safer? Because here's the truth nobody tells you. Choosing yourself is the hardest, scariest, most worthwhile thing you'll ever do. And on the other side of that choice is a life you can't even imagine yet, one so much better than anything you settled for before. What would you do if you were standing in that courthouse, watching your carefully planned future explode? Would you run after it, trying to salvage something broken? Or would you walk away with your head high, trusting that something better is waiting? Drop a comment and let me know. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose yourself when it felt impossible, hit that like button and subscribe, because we all need reminders that we're not alone in our struggles. Share this with someone who needs to hear that walking away isn't giving up, it's leveling up.